Hey, it's Lisa, and we're excited to bring you episode number 5 of Nashville on the Rocks. Our guest this week is an accomplished guitar player, songwriter, engineer, and producer. He's a solo artist, but also collaborates in tours with some heavy hitters, spanning multiple genres, including chart-topping country artists Jody Messina and nu metal pioneers Jonathan Davis and Ray Luzier of the groundbreaking band Korn. Here he is, our friend Chris Nix. Oh my God. Okay, Chris, I am so excited to have you on Nashville on the Rocks. Thank you so much for coming in. This has been a joy. We've had you on the books now for a few weeks. I've been really looking forward to this. So
finally.
Yes. So thank you so much for making time today to come in.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for the invitation.
Of course. Okay. So I sent you a few questions and I just wanted to get started. But the first thing I like to ask people when they come on, because I feel like this really gives me a chance to kind of, just jump point from here and like kind of get it in my head. But what was the first rock album you bought?
Led Zeppelin 4.
All right.
With my own money. Yeah, that was the, I'd gotten like Kiss Alive 2 and Rock and Roll Over for Christmas. And that following year, in a little turntable. So that following year, I really wanted the Led Zeppelin 4. So I saved up lawnmower money. And
that's awesome.
Lawnmower money, huh?
Yeah, cut grass. Yep. That's how I got my first guitar, too, actually.
What? Seriously?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, the things $15. For the guitar?
Oh, yeah.
Oh my God. Okay.
Took 3 weeks to get the money together.
So if you
wasn't a booming lawn business.
But Led Zeppelin 4 band, Led Zeppelin's one of my favorite classic rock bands. I didn't really appreciate them so much until I was maybe 20 or so, and then I just completely fell in love with them. Maybe I was a little older. It might have been 22. But that is so cool. So what was your first concert? Well, your first rock concert.
The first rock concert, there are two really, because there's rock concert in the arena type of thing, and that was Kiss in 1977.
Okay.
I was 6 or 7 years old. My aunt took me. And,
your aunt took you?
Yeah,
Where
along
were your
with
parents?
her daughter, cousin. Yeah,
okay.
Well, my dad's very cool. Anyway, so we saw him at the Carolina Coliseum in Columbia, South Carolina, and Tom Petty opened for him.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, and I remember this clearly because maybe it wasn't 77, it might have been 78. Anyway, I'm sure the historians watching will know what year that was. But I remember as a kid seeing a guy with straight blonde hair and granny glasses and a top hat thinking, who's this guy?
That's funny.
It's wild, yeah.
That's crazy. That's one of those situations where I feel like that one of those people I wouldn't see on the bill. I wouldn't
The
picture.
funny thing about that was that later I got to know Stan Lynch, who was the drummer in Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. And he said, I told him that story. And he said, yeah, that tour sucked. I'm like, what? Just Stan's like that. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, first of all, you're playing your whole show with another band's logo hanging over you, And the other thing was, he said, but I did get a valuable lesson from Gene Simmons. We were playing in Albuquerque or something, and he said he walked into this bar across from the hotel they were staying in, and they had roped off the pool room in the back for Gene and his security guy. So he went back in there with them, and he goes, Gene, what are we doing playing here? Mm-hmm. And Gene goes, son, play your secondary markets and they'll buy your records for years. And he was like, okay, I know everything I need to know about Gene Simmons now.
Yep. Businessman.
Yeah, seriously. That makes sense. That's kind of crazy. Well, Dan's first concert was
Journey. And you remember that bill with Bryan Adams, Cuts Like a Knife, and I think it was
That's also two people I would never expect to be on a bill.
Frontiers record, I think it was.
Yeah.
Remember that? I don't know, 1980 or 81, something like that.
Oh, he's such a nice Canadian. I love Bryan Adams.
Yeah, he's good.
So, okay.
His guitar player's great.
Yeah, well, I mean.
Keith is awesome.
Oh, you know Keith?
I don't know him, no.
Okay.
No, that's the only name I can remember. Keith I forget his last name now.
Well, it's funny.
Yeah, I like him a lot. He's great.
It's funny because I'm thinking of him, like being the main guitar player, and I was like, oh, of course he's got another guitar player. Why wouldn't he? Right over my head. So, So, getting back to the whole first rock concerts, I've said this 1,000 times. You and Dan and a few other guests that we've had on, you guys really grew up during the best times of rock music. I feel like a
lot of my favorite bands were definitely playing there. I mean, it was very cool. I mean, that said, when I saw King's X for $6 in Atlanta, at the Cotton Club. When I moved there, I was 19.
That's crazy.
And that was the year that It's Love was out. So that was probably their biggest. I don't know, maybe Dogman. I don't know, but so there were different peaks of things that were awesome, but there was definitely a lot of really great rock around at the time. I loved Queen.
Yeah.
And I only just found out they're playing here in October today. Yeah, I just found out today. The tickets are gone. So.
Yeah, they're gone.
Of course they are.
They're gone. Yeah.
I feel like that happens a lot to me in Nashville. When I turn around and somebody tells me something
every time,
yeah, and then that's what it is. Or they're like, "Oh, I'm on a waiting list right now, and I can't even get in." I'm like, "Waiting list? Since when did that happen?" It's a totally different world out there. So I always like to think that you guys had, the less technology, but more experiences.
Well, that's actually the other first concert that was the first real show I ever saw. This is kind of in with what you're saying. This sort of proves your point. I grew up in Augusta, Georgia, and every year they had the Savannah River Raft Race, the Augusta Jam, where they would have all these bands. So my first show ever seeing in real life was the Dixie Dregs, Atlanta Rhythm Section, and Mother's Finest.
Okay.
All playing together, which are still three of my favorite bands. But, finding that level of anything is impossible. And I remember thinking at the time, you just have to be that good. Right. I just thought that was the standard. Okay, so here's the line. You have to be here. You have to be this tall to play rock and roll, And so, that had a huge effect on how I approach, practicing and all that stuff, sort of the standards of what.
You kind of set a high bar for yourself and not even realizing it.
They
right?
set a really high bar. It was okay.
And then
you have to be that.
It's your first impression, and then it's that's what you stick with,
Right. It gets imprinted on you, and that's it.
And that totally makes sense in that sense. So being that you're from Georgia, what was it like growing up for you in that area? Is is Augusta a big music place?
It's interesting because yes and no. There were acts like that would come through. And with the Dregs, they all sort of started there. Steve Morse grew up, through his youth in there. And and we all knew that, growing up, and that was sort of a badge of honor. Steve Morse is from here, And
great player.
James Brown, all that stuff. So I mean, I jammed with guys from James Brown's band, in this
so
jazz
cool.
club at in Le Café du Taux, and there was a pretty high standard with a lot of the things that were going on. But the scene was always weird because it was a lot of cover stuff, and I wasn't really interested in trying to be the best Van Halen cover band or the best whatever,
Right.
I had friends that loved it and they still do and have fun, but I was more interested in, I grew up painting as well as playing guitar. And so for me, music and art, they're all the same thing. Music is art, right? And so for me, writing music was the same thing as painting, coming up with new things and sounds and all that stuff. So, it didn't really work with my idea of what I needed to do with what I wanted to do. Anyway, I got really lucky though. There was when I was about 17 or 18, I guess, I found out that Eric Johnson was playing at this local sort of regional club, and so I cold called the club owner and just said, "Hey, you should let me open for Eric Johnson." And he's like, "Who the fuck are you?" But he goes, "Oh yeah, okay." He'd kind of heard of me or whatever, and he said, I should, huh? And I said, yeah. And he said, let me call you back. So he calls me back about 20 or 30 minutes later. I found out later what he did was called 2 or 3 of the older guitar players around town and said, who's this Nix kid that,
God.
and should I let him open? And they were all like, yeah, you should totally let him do it. So, thanks to Jerry Ernest and Steve Mitchell and Jeff Jordan and those guys. But so I had 3 weeks to write a set of material and get a band. I didn't even have a band.
Seriously?
But they offered to pay me $300 for the gig.
Yeah.
So
you're going to make a band.
I made a band because $150 in whatever year that was for a musician, was a lot of money. So I just split that money between the drummer and the bass player.
Sure.
But they had to do exactly what I told them to do, So I made no money on it, and which was fine because we opened for them, and it was a musician's audience. We played in front of, 500-600 people, and after that night, then I was kind of allowed to do my own thing,
I feel like that would be a very challenging audience for anything. A musician's audience with like a bunch of people in the crowd that like other musicians and people that are
it's a trip. It is a trip. It's
especially when you're that young.
Yeah, I had a writer friend of mine used to call it the sea of folded arms. When he would come to one of those shows, it's like,
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yep.
We're waiting for you to impress us.
Yes, everybody's just perched, and they may not like really think. They may not even be really thinking that, but it certainly looks intimidating enough.
Certainly, yeah, and you definitely feel that way.
Yeah.
At the same time, though, it was the only person that made me nervous was my dad.
Okay.
And he was at that gig. He didn't come to. He came to a lot of them actually, but he was the only person I ever felt nervous playing. And he's not a musician.
Oh, really?
He loves music, but he's not a musician. But it just.
Sure.
Steve Morse leaning on my amp while I'm playing, or Eric, or whatever. No problem.
Right.
You can only do what you can do. But my dad is like. I don't know.
So is your family like, when you started playing guitar, I know you mentioned that you started playing guitar when you were 3.
Mm-hmm.
So who gave you your first guitar?
I have a picture of the moment, actually. It was Christmas morning, I think 1972 or 3.
Mm-hmm.
I got it for Christmas. Santa Claus brought it to me. And it was a little, tiny beginner guitar.
That's awesome.
And, so... Man, there's a picture of me, and
Did you get lessons, or did someone in your family teach you?
No, so I'm left-handed, and I tried to go to someone to learn when I was about 7 or 8 years old. I wanted to take lessons, and kind of I could play, but I wanted to know what I was doing.
Yeah.
And so I went to take lessons with this guy, and he tried to talk me into like flipping the guitar right-handed and string,
It's odd.
I honestly, I'll tell you the truth. Any left-hander that I know that has never played and they're talking to me about advice for playing, I always tell them try to play right-handed if you can get comfortable with it, because Steve Morse is left-handed. My buddy Will Rodriguez is left-handed. Like, there are all these amazing left-handed guys that no one knows they're left-handed because they play right-handed. But by then I'd been playing long enough that it just felt uncomfortable.
Sure.
So that scared me off of lessons. I have to conform. No, that's not going to happen. I still had that even then. The
little bit of the rebellious.
Yeah.
Well,
I can't really.
It's got to be like putting on shoes backwards, like left on the right. Like it's got to feel really awkward.
It is very awkward. Pick up one of my guitars sometime and try to play it left-handed. It's weird.
I can't even wrap my head around that. Like, it just would be completely backwards, man. Like the picking hand and your chord hand, I just don't see how anybody can flip. But they do, I guess, when they're young, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
No,
That's it, yeah.
And I think some people are, a little bit ambidextrous. They can do a little both, especially when you're left-handed. You're kind of pushed to do.
It's true. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we do use both hands more often than a right-handed person would tend to. Or righty, as I like to call them. But, it's a funny thing. Most of the people that, if you've never played something, everything feels awkward. When if I sit down to a drum kit or something, it's a little awkward, no matter which direction things are set up. So it really is kind of, a really good buddy of mine, who I mentioned a minute ago, one of the guitar players in town, Steve Mitchell, he's left-handed, but he plays Albert King style with the high E on top.
Okay.
Because the guitar in their house was strung right-handed, and that's just what he started fiddling around with, and so that's how he learned.
Right.
So I think it's all just a matter of that. The reason I tell people that if they are interested in playing and they haven't committed to a dexterity yet, to try and learn right-handed, just the availability of guitars.
Okay, yeah. That
There are
makes
so
sense.
many wonderful guitars out there that are absolutely of no use to me because
Oh, it sucks.
Yeah, that does suck.
right.
You would think that there would be more.
Yeah, I've been trying to make up for lost time with that though. So
No, I mean, that's a cool experience. Just knowing, I mean, that's a cool story, like knowing like how someone who's a lefty would go through that. Dan's friend, Matt Farley, who plays
he's
drums.
left-handed too.
He's left-handed. Does he play guitar left-handed too?
he does.
Yes, he does, babe. He's a lefty.
All right. So he's a lefty through and through.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, we
Forgot about that.
commiserate quite often about being kept down by the man with the right hand.
Right. Like
Poor
nobody.
lefties.
No, poor lefties. When I was bartending, there was, well, I still am, but when I was working at Acme forever, there was a few bartenders that we had hired, and it seemed like all of a sudden we had a bunch of left-handed bartenders, which never has made a difference to me, except that when they would set up the bar, I've only met people that have set up the bar a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And with these guys, it was all flipped, every single one of them. And I was like, are you left-handed? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, this is very new for me. Like, I've been doing this for like
See how it feels, babe?
17 years. And
Yeah.
I've never like worked with other people that have like swapped everything like this. So there was at least 3 people I worked with. I was like, do you mind if you're getting off shift now if I just move this around? They're like, I'm like, I can't function. Like, I can't even. But I just remember so distinctly, like everyone, they're like, yeah, I'm left-handed. And I was like, and you've always bartended like this? They're like, yeah. I'm like, that's interesting. I was like, all right, power to you guys, whatever. So
Yeah, that's just what you know.
it was interesting. But okay, so going back a little bit to growing up in Augusta and like you're playing and taking instruments. Well, I mean, you took lessons for a little bit, but pretty much you're self-taught.
Yeah. Oh no, I didn't take any lessons.
All
It
right.
stopped at the one lesson where he tried to make me play right-handed, and they're like, yeah, that's not going to work for me.
You're like, I'm not going to do that.
Talk to Jimi Hendrix and Paul McCartney.
Right.
It worked for them,
For
you know.
sure. So why?
And what is it about lefties? And there's just so many badass lefties,
That's
man.
true.
I mean, when you're a left-handed guitar player, you're usually a badass.
I
You ever notice that?
think it's most of the ones I know that are left-handed are pretty great. I think it has to do with perseverance. You have to really love it to overcome that 25% upcharge.
Man,
I can see that.
But seriously, I really do think that you have to be pretty determined, and I think that's part of it. I don't know if it's necessarily a physiological function of left-handedness.
And
I
left
like
brain,
to think that we're
right
superior,
brain.
so we can go with that if you want. But I do think that it's
Put
a
it
lot
on
of
a
it is
sticker.
just having I
Yeah.
think
you
it,
guys got
you
the
know,
edge.
Yeah,
Some edge.
That's it. It's the whole right left brain thing. Yeah.
Exactly. So, so like so like now you're on your own and you're playing and when did you get into like involved with like your first band? Or did you just start playing, were you like playing solo? Were you playing with other people?
Well, when I was a kid, I
that.
played with grown-ups, and I think I played. Oh, my phone is never actually on, ever.
You're fine.
So when I was a kid, I played with grown-ups, really. And when I was 12, I played my first, like, real gig.
Okay.
And again, it was with grown-ups. And then, by the time I was 14, I was gigging around, playing with other people in their 20s and 30s and stuff.
Sure.
And but I really don't. It's all such a blur. I do remember some of the first shows, but not like what was the one and what was the, because there was a lot of it. It was a lot of playing and a lot of rehearsals and a lot of jamming and all that stuff.
Sure. So like it sounds like your family was pretty supportive of you. Like
They were. It was, it was a very, well, if that's what you're going to do, then do it.
didn't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good luck. They were, you know, like I said, my dad came to almost every, especially the shows that were mine, you know, that were my band. You know, he came to all of those that he could, and by who could, I mean that were in our hometown. But yeah, no, it was that was another thing too, that, you know, the determination part of, well, I'm on my own. This is, you know, if I want an electric guitar, I'm going to have to mow lawns and get an electric guitar, you know, which is good. I'm not saying that everyone should have to do that. You know, I've certainly not been that way with my kid, just because,
right.
You know, he is not spoiled, but he has never wanted for anything, you know? So I don't know. I don't think there's any one hard, true answer for what the best way to do that is.
Oh, 100%.
You know?
It just gives it gives like a understanding of at the time, like you're like, okay, so you went out and mowed lawns for 3 weeks and bought your first guitar, and like you obviously took pride in keeping it and learning more about it, and probably made you feel really good.
Oh man, I cherish that thing.
Yeah. Do you still have it?
No. I traded it about 6 or 8 months later for another guitar that was just as bad.
Okay.
Parallel move.
Yeah. It was a sideways move. Yeah. They were both Sears specials, you know. It was, yeah.
That's awesome. So like you're playing with adults and you're playing some gigs, and like, how was that for a while? Like, when did you start? Did you make your own band after a while, or did you just put together shows?
Well, that was the opening for Eric Johnson's story. Was I played in an original band with some people who it was their original music.
Okay.
You know, with a guy named Jeff Jordan, phenomenal guitar player, amazing writer, still one of my favorite. Everything, great singer, great guitar player, great writer, and he was at that time. You know, to me, he was ancient, but he was, you know, like 25, you know, and I was 14, 15,
right.
You know. But I played a lot with him. And then, you know, and that was one of those bands you had to be of a certain caliber so that was sort of a badge of honor to be in that band. And then when the opening spot for Eric Johnson came up, I tried to put together my own groups to go out and do stuff. But, you know, everyone wanted to gig. You know, they wanted to go out and play for 5, 6 hours a night doing covers
Cover
on the
songs.
weekends or whatever, you know, and it just, you know, and I did a little of that, but every time I would talk myself into it, I immediately regretted it.
Yeah.
And just was like, I just can't.
Yeah. How did it feel like in comparison? I mean, I understand why people do it, and a lot of people do it, you know.
Some people
for money.
just love doing that.
That's true.
And there's
yeah.
nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
I have friends that are sidemen with people that, you know, or play downtown in Nashville that, you know, they just want to play.
Yeah, they just want to play.
They're not writers and they're not, you know, whatever. And there's nothing wrong with that. You can just love playing the guitar or playing whatever you play. I just wanted to do that. You know, I just wanted to write and make things.
Oh,
and,
sure.
You know, it's one of those.
I think when you have that, like, that kind of like artistic desire or bug, I think that's something that a lot of musicians hope for. And I think that depending on how that goes for them, you know, they either lean maybe one way or the other, you know, they're more into writing or they're more into performing, you know, and I think there's a lot of people that are in the middle. But I feel like, I know a lot of people that just would maybe aren't the best songwriters or don't consider themselves to be songwriters at all.
Right.
You know what it
They're
is,
just
though,
performers.
too? It's like one of those things where you start early, maybe trying to write songs, and you kind of work this muscle, and it kind of becomes your identity as a musician. Because that's the way I feel about it.
I think what it is you learn. At least for me, I can't speak for other people. For me, I just wanted to hear stuff, you know, and I couldn't find exactly what I wanted to hear. You know, I would find things that I loved. Don't get me wrong, and certainly things I was like, man, I wish I'd done that. But I wanted to be able to do that myself. I wanted to be able to make things that I also loved, you know. And
that's probably why you're like a producer and an engineer as well. You're seeking that sound maybe in your head, maybe perhaps.
That's really it. You know, it's that, and also there's you're more relaxed if you've been doing it. Just like anything. Like if you know, I've been doing it my whole life. I've always written music. The first thing I did on a guitar when I figured out my first 3 chords was write something with those 3 chords, you know. The second thing I did was learn a Beatles song, you know. But it's, you know, to me, the experience of doing it informs. It's just like being on stage. People who suffer from stage fright, like that's anomalous to me. I understand the psychology of it, but when I toured with JD, we get back from Europe and there are pictures of us in front of 100,000 people or whatever. And like, oh man, what was that like? And how, were you nervous? Like, the only thing that I thought about when I walked out was, are my ears working and is my guitar in tune?
Yeah.
And I hope that the pedal board didn't get broken when they slammed it out here and plugged everything in. You know what I mean? Like, because, you're doing the gig, you're getting up to play. And it is cool to look out and see all that. But it's also, I've done this. I'm playing guitar.
Right.
It could be two people and it would be the same feeling of like, I want to do well for whoever's paying attention.
Sure.
You want to do well. So, but yeah, I think there's a thing where you become comfortable with your own creativity and you learn to trust it,
Yeah.
And I don't trust much in the world more than I trust my creativity.
Yeah.
I don't worry about it. Like, Ray Luzier was coming over last week for us to write. I had absolutely no time to prepare anything or, so he got there and we sat down and he played something really cool because he is wont to do. And I was like, here, how about this? And he was like, oh, yeah. And he looks at me, he was like, did you just come up with that? And I said, yeah, come on. And he started like, of course, right, of course, it's you. But it really, I wasn't worried about it. You know what I mean? Like, I knew something would come. Like, you just always trust that there's, this...
Well, you have all of the past experiences and your confidence like behind you, so
it's never failed.
It's never failed you. Yeah,
you know what I mean. And until that day comes,
what do you do when you have writer's block? Do you have writer's block?
I don't. Wow. No, I wouldn't mind being able to have a switch like writer's block. I'm going to go sleep for 3 days. Yeah, that'd be nice. But,
no, I think that, babe, I think that's kind of something that you've talked about similarly.
Oh, there's the feeling that you get, like if you work with another artist, and collaborating is pretty much a thing that I do a lot, whether it's guys within your own band and your own stuff, or somebody that's kind of fresh to you. You know what I'm saying? It's like I never stress about coming up with something cool with a collaboration or my own stuff. It's like, you've been doing it so long, right? So it's like, you don't worry about that.
Yeah.
Something
You're
will
focused
happen.
on something else.
Yeah.
Well, it's an interesting combination because you have your relaxed being about your creativity, and then the observation of the person you're in front of, And so when you're writing with someone, I write off of people. If I'm working with someone else, I don't always work with other people, but when I do, it's always someone I respect because why waste your time, if you're not going to respect the person across from you. But, and it's usually someone I know, and you can get to know something about someone when you're sitting down working on stuff together. And, you kind of figure out what their leanings are and what their taste is. And you think, what this would be, maybe this will tickle their fancy.
Sure.
Maybe this will inspire them to have another idea that'll then kick you into another space,
Yeah.
So, yeah, that stuff's really cool.
No, that's really interesting, like hearing how that is. And Dan, that's like, I feel like you don't run into very many, come to think of it, you don't run into very many like writer's blocks either. I feel like you're always like toiling with something.
Toiling. I think the bag of tricks grows, that type of thing, where you got a reliable bag of tricks where you have many ways to go at something.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's paramount as far as being a musician. I just think it's like a therapy session almost as well. So you kind of get to know yourself, you get to know music, you share it with other people, and it's a cool thing, I think.
Yeah.
Well, like you mentioned the toiling thing, maybe you run into this, but my problem, like right now, I've been writing and mixing and editing stuff for the last 3 weeks. And so I've played guitar maybe a total of an hour in 3 weeks. And I'm usually up in the morning and I play for 2 hours just to start the day to keep things together as you get older, especially. But a lot of it is just because I love it. I love playing. And I love playing when I've been playing a lot.
Yeah.
It's going to hurt when I pick it up tomorrow, and I have to really, because I've got to start getting back in shape, Yeah. And it happens. It slips that quickly, It's, and it'll come back, but there's part of you that's like, what?
Yeah.
Are we sure this is the time that it doesn't,
Yeah. Am I out of touch?
Right.
Was it too long? You know what I mean? For
but
that
it does
to happen?
but the toiling part, when he said that, it made me think about when you, like I have all these ideas I'm working on right now, and the only time I play is when I'm recording that idea. But I'm starting to notice that I'm having to think more when I play to get those recorded than I normally would. Usually, if I'm on top of it, I can just, there's the idea, it's already out.
Sure.
Hands do what you tell them. Or you don't even have to tell them. Now I have to tell them what to do, and, but, a couple of days, it'll be fine.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah, to take the thinking out of the equation is kind of like the key.
Yeah, that's that's everything. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good way to put it.
You can be free. And that frees up everything, I think.
Yeah, it frees up your mind to like focus on other stuff. That's badass.
It's deep, man, deep.
It's deep. No, it's cool. I love like talking to people and hearing just their experience. It's really eye-opening for me. So you've been playing music since you were like 3. Did you always want to be a musician? Because it sounds like...
I don't remember not being one.
Yeah. Yeah, you just
Really?
Always been it.
Yeah.
It was not
I
maybe a
honestly
conscious thought. You just did it.
I don't have a memory before music.
That's
because
crazy.
even before I got the guitar, I was messing with my aunt's piano and, the drums or whatever. It was always something.
It sounds like your aunt was kind of musical. Or did she just love music too?
Well, she and my dad had taken piano lessons when they were kids, and her daughter, my older cousin Dee, took piano, and I just, as a little guy, just thought that was the coolest thing, that she could sit down at piano and, play a tune. That was just cool, because it is.
Yeah, it is cool. That's kind of funny. Okay, so how long did you, when you were in Augusta, well, I don't know, like when you moved to Nashville, did your transition to Nashville come about? Were you in Augusta? Did you just move? Did you move around a few places?
I was in Augusta. I left Augusta in the 90s. I moved to Florida.
Okay.
And I lived there for 15 years.
Oh, that's right. You were with
Tom. That's how I met Tom Hurst, was down in Gainesville. That's right. I think fate had me move to Gainesville so I could meet Tom.
Yeah,
and then we could move up here. Yeah. And then we played together a bunch down there, and with several friends of ours. And then in 2010, I moved up here, and he was already up here. I think, he was already up here. A couple of other friends of ours were here, and they were all, you should come. And my wife Liz was like, we should go. Yeah. So I said, okay, let's do it.
Is Liz a musician too?
No, she's classically trained pianist that doesn't consider herself a musician. She started playing piano when she was 7 and can sight read anything, but you take the music away from her and she's like, bing. She doesn't really.
Right.
She won't play in front of me, so I've never heard her play.
Are you serious?
I've composed etudes for her, like little practice pieces and stuff. And, she has played them, but not when I'm here.
Not when you're there.
Yeah.
Has she ever recorded them?
Oh, no.
And have you listened to them?
No.
That's hilarious.
No.
That's kind of adorable.
She thinks I'm too,
Yeah, she doesn't want to put herself out there.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Me and Liz would have a lot in common.
I told you.
Yeah. But, but now I'm at a point where it's like Dan and I, I'll sing in front of him, or I'll be singing, or I'll do something. Because I was in a band for years and years and years before we knew each other. But I'll be singing something, and then I'll turn around, he's there, and I'm like, he's like, it sounds really good. I'm like,
kind of like me with the weed. Well, it's me. Yeah, exactly.
I'm like, thanks, Oh my God. So you were in Gainesville, and then you moved here in probably 2010. And then, so going from pretty much Georgia to Florida to here, did you notice a big difference in musicianship here, or the quality of people coming here?
The number of great musicians.
The number of great musicians,
better. Yeah. I know some musicians that don't live here who are phenomenal.
Yep. That's very true.
Right?
Yeah.
But the sheer number of people here who are phenomenal is pretty great. It's really cool, actually. It's one of the things that I've always been drawn to here. It's because I've done work up here before I moved. Like I'd done some studio stuff and whatever. But the thing that always drew me here was just the level of people you would easily run into. Whereas in Augusta, it was more difficult to find people, like especially with the stuff that I was doing. Like it was involved, you know. And I was really fortunate to find the guys that I did back then, and they were great. They were also about the only people in that town that could play it. You know, I just for that stuff. There were other people that were great at other things, but for this stuff, they were, uniquely qualified for it. Up here, it was the biggest thing that drew me was being able to come up here and write stuff that people could play that were here, that there were people available here. I mean, I'm working on a record right now, and Chris Frazier's playing drums on it, who played with Steve Vai, and he's in Foreigner right now, was in Whitesnake. He's an amazing drummer.
Damn.
And Billy Sheehan's playing bass on it.
Yeah.
So...
I hear those guys are pretty good.
They're all right. But I am looking for some guys, if that's, if you hear anything, you know what I mean?
Oh my gosh. So were you always like a rock guy?
I was never a full rock guy. Like I also love different types of orchestral music. I write orchestral music. I have a ton of jazz things I've written, so it's all over the place. I do definitely have the soul of a rocker, and then, funk is in there pretty, not very deep. Like it's right there on the surface, right there waiting to come out because, in Augusta, was one thing there that was cool was that, if you couldn't groove in that town, you were not getting a gig because, James Brown, you had to be able to play.
Seriously.
So, yeah, that's cool.
Well, I think that that part, I mean, just your description comes down to like, you ever meet someone, they're rare. I've met 2 of them in my life. You ever met somebody who's just like, I don't listen to music. I'm like,
I have one or two, couple
of them.
But not many.
Yeah, not many. And to me, that's the same thing as like, okay, so you just don't like food? You don't like any food, nothing at all, right?
Yeah.
Like nothing
Like people that
suits
hate
your style.
dogs. People that hate dogs. Fucking weirdos, man.
What's wrong with those people?
What's wrong?
Yeah, I don't know, man. She's...
No, but seriously, like people like all music, it's so, there's so many different kinds. So it's like you can't find one thing that moves you. And it's all like an appreciation of like art.
Well, the thing that's interesting to me is because of what music does to me, the physical and emotional effect it has on me, it's weird to imagine that not existing. Like hearing stuff and not, having that response to it. It's something I can't really picture. I have synesthesia, which is, perfect pitch or whatever. So like you drop a cup on the floor, I can tell you that's a C sharp or what, you know what I mean? So
you're rare.
So
you're like
everything
a unicorn.
is, well, I know I have a really good buddy of mine, Kenny Varga, who's a great producer, engineer also.
I know Kenny.
Yeah, so we kind of commiserate about it because every time a bus horn or, like everything, and everything is colors,
Yeah.
And so to me, what a weird world it would be. Like, to me, imagining not having that is weird. Now trying to imagine someone who doesn't hear music at all is just bizarre. But it doesn't mean that you're weird if you don't listen to music. It's not something I can imagine.
I think you're weird. I'm gonna look in the camera and say that. I think you're a little weird.
Yeah,
but
man, you
I'll
guys
put that
are
on
weird.
me. No, there was a guy that was friends with my first guitar player, and he was awesome. He was a cool guy, and he was like, "Yeah, I come to your shows, but like to be honest, he's like, I come to support you and Jesse. I don't listen to music." And I was like, "What do you mean?" Like he's like, "Yeah, it just doesn't do it for me." I was like, "Like none of it, nothing."
No music?
Nothing.
Right.
And he was like 24.
wild.
Yeah, it was crazy. He's like, yeah, the last time I probably listened to something other than like your show was like probably like 9 months ago. I was like,
and especially at 24, because for the human animal, that's like prime mating age. You know what I mean? So like all those cues, the mating cues and stuff, you would think that would be peak
not there.
music listening.
Yeah.
At least fake it, dude. Pretend you listen to music.
It also makes me wonder, like, if you don't listen to music at all, you can't be a good dancer then, right? It's impossible.
I just think you're a bad human being. I'm just kidding, guys. No, it is just
Here's
weird.
the thing. If you don't hear the music and you're dancing, you're lying.
You're lying, right?
Dishonest, man.
You're lying. Oh.
You're a liar.
Oh God. Well, that was a fun little trip going down. But yeah, and then I met another guy who was roommates with someone I knew, and the person I knew was a musician, and he was a business major, and he's like, yeah, I come to his shows, but I don't listen to music. I was like, what is wrong with you people?
It's like that thing with when Peter Griffin, he's like, yeah, I just never watched The Godfather.
Yeah, right, okay.
It's like, really?
It
Dude, you never
insists
watched
upon itself. Yeah.
It's just upon itself.
Yeah.
Oh my God. That's so funny. Well, okay, so moving to Nashville and you see all these different people and like so you have like sounds like you have a real big appreciation for what moves you. And so you start writing with people and you start performing with people.
Well, at first I didn't write with anyone.
Okay.
It was it's still not something I enjoy doing it. But there's the Nashville way of we're going to get together and have a write, they call it, which I have no interest in.
Okay.
And then there's getting with people that are truly artistic, that want to create something interesting. And that I'm intrigued by. So at first I didn't know those people here. You know, it was, just trying to get out and play, to meet people and play, connect, and all those things that you do. So the first year I basically said yes to anything.
Okay.
Literally anything. And after about a year, I'd played with enough people that I started to say no to certain things. And then the gigs got better. And then after the second year, started saying no to a lot of things. And then the gigs got a lot better. And then I started saying no to most things. And then the gigs got amazing. So it's a really strange thing. Like, just be an asshole and say no. It'll take you everywhere.
It's amazing what some boundaries can do.
Good advice.
Strange, yeah. No, it's not true. You have to be a nice person. I'm not saysaying I am, but
no, you are a nice person, but I know exactly what you mean.
Agreeable and nice and all those things. I'm also. It's a couple of things. I'm at a point where I'm really only interested in doing things that are creative.
Yeah.
If I'm going to do a tour, all right. So here's a fun one. When Ray Luzier called me about doing the Jonathan Davis gig, I said, "Can I hear the record?" Because he told me how long it was going to be a year-long thing, and I said, "Well, may I hear the record? So I can decide if I'm interested." And he goes, "Are you fucking serious?" Because this is Ray of Korn calling me about a gig with the singer from Korn, and everyone else he had talked to was like, yeah.
Immediately.
But then they didn't work out,
Okay.
And so he said, yeah, Jonathan wants someone who's unusual, that's not, the typical rock guy, someone who can rock, but, versatility and weird.
And weird.
So, yeah. So he calls me. But yeah, I just said, can I hear the record? And he sent it to me, and it was incredible.
Wow.
Black Labyrinth is one of my favorite records still, and I played it for a year, with that tour. But yeah, I was like, this is great. I would love to do this, and we got together, and that was it. But I was at a point where, I can't commit a year of my life to something, like we'll all still work together.
Yeah.
Again, we do. Ray was at my house today.
Right.
But to leave my home for what amounts to a year.
Right. It's a long time.
You need to love what it is you're going to do. Because I've done tours like that where I wasn't crazy about what I was doing. And became, I kept it inside like a cancerous wad of frustration. But, it just became unhappy, and realized, it's just, this isn't. Again, it goes back to the cover band thing, because it's kind of the same thing. You're playing someone else's music, and great for them, but also this isn't. If it's not interesting to you, then who won?
Yeah, I think that's an exceptional way to look at it. I think it's a really honest way to look at it, and I think that if maybe more musicians in general or more people like viewed it that way, there might be some more authenticity out there. I say that cautionary, but
possibly. Well, there's also, one of the other things that I did was, particularly when I was saying yes a lot more, the way I found an interest, the end for me was, okay, so see what you can do to make this, to do your thing within this. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean get in and just like, here's my lick, you know. I mean more of understand what their music is about and see how you can paint within their framework the way that you paint.
Right.
And make it, you know, interesting, or make it what you view as interesting, and then see if you don't get fired, you know. Like that was always the challenge, right. You know. The Jody Messina gig was like that. It was I didn't audition for that. I didn't get any gig that I auditioned for. I think I did 2 auditions, and one was for like a 14-year-old. And I walked in, like I turned around and walked out. I'm like,
why would I do that?
They're not going to give me this gig. But no, the Jody Messina thing.
You're not old. You're just not 14.
I'm not 14.
18. You know
right.
what I mean?
Experienced.
Yes.
No, the Jody thing. I went in and I was told, the band leader told me, like, learn every solo lick for lick. Don't move, like stay in front of the microphone and don't wiggle too much, and you know, all this stuff.
Fun stuff, huh?
Right? Yeah, just like, oh, okay, cool. So the first show, we're on stage in front of however many people, and first song is like one of her rockin' songs or whatever, and the solo in it is whoever played on it, it's their idea of a rock solo, right? Okay. And I learned the solo dutifully. And she comes over and she's running around doing her jumping jacks, and she runs over like, all right, new guy, let's see what you got. And in my idiot guitar brain, because I'm playing guitar, you know, which means all intellect is way off somewhere else, I interpreted that as she wants to know what I have.
Right.
Not what she meant. She just meant play the solo. She was playing to the crowd, but this was my interpretation of it at the time. So I let one rip, you know, and she stood there and watched, and at the end she's like, yeah. And
what did the crowd do?
They took all their clothes off and threw their panties at me. Yes. It was amazing. Yeah. They were like, oh, guitar solo.
Yeah, clearly.
Yeah.
That's what we signed up for.
Right, yeah. They knew the difference, you know. So after the show, the band leader came up and says, I don't know why I'm not firing you right now. Like, she usually would have told me to fire you by now, because that was not the solo. And he goes, but she liked it, so okay. I'm like, all right. And so I started testing the fences every night to see, and she started liking that. And so, you know, so, but the point is, but I never did anything that wasn't in the context of her music. Right. You know what I mean?
That's
like, it wasn't like I was up there, like, you know, self-flatulating, you know.
This wasn't like a back to
whip or whatever.
This wasn't like a Back to the Future move where he's just like totally rocking out on the guitar, and they're looking at him. They're like, you were fine at first. Now you've taken it way too far.
Right. Yeah. With gigs, it's just, I love playing with people. I don't want it to sound like I don't. I do. It's just, you know, I still have to be able to play like me.
Yeah.
Right. And I like the challenge of finding a way to do that. Play these solos note for note. You don't need me.
Right.
You can get anyone to do that. You know, like around here, to be clear. Like in Nashville, anyone can play that solo. You know, like it's a piece of cake. Just that guy.
Just out of curiosity, where were you for the show? Were you in Nashville?
No. This was, I want to say it was like Maryland or something. I'll have to add Josh Carter, our keyboardist, who's one of my closest friends now. We became close because we got hired for at the same time, you know, so our first show was the same one. I'll have to see if he remembers. But yeah, I think it was like Maryland or somewhere.
I mean, that's just cool in general, though. Like, I mean, growing up in the 90s, early 2000s, I do like me some Jody Messina, which actually, if I can mention some of the people that you've played with, Ray Cyrus.
That was one gig, but it was so much fun. I can honestly say, what was his hit song?
Achy Breaky Heart.
Achy Breaky Heart. Never played it in a cover band or any of that stuff. The only one time I've ever played it on stage ever in my life was with him. Yeah. He was super nice, really cool. We rehearsed once or twice at his house. The band was fantastic, you know. And
I could totally see that.
He was so nice. Like, you know, he slipped me a hundo handshake on the way out there. He's, I know you guys got lunch, you know, we're giving lunch and stuff, but here, man, you know, go.
That's fucking cool.
Buy yourself a dress or whatever. You know?
No, I like that. I met him one time and he was very nice. I was doing some, what was I doing, babe?
Some extra work on that show,
thank
Nashville?
you. No, it wasn't on Nashville. I was
What
doing
do I know?
I was doing extra work for his show on CMT. And something the King. Still the King.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just sitting at a table, and you know they're very specific with us, like don't talk to anybody, you know, just like you don't want to distract them. So I'm like,
Don't look eye. Don't look eye.
So he sits down right next to us and starts talking to us, and he's like, "How are you girls doing? You have a wonderful day." And I was like, "Is this okay for us to be talking to you right now?" I was like, "Oh, if we don't talk to you, then we're gonna look terrible." I was like, "Hey, you know, like he was just so sweet, and like I really appreciate y'all."
We spent
doing
half
this.
of the 4-hour rehearsal at his. We were in his house, his palace, you know, in his living room, and we spent half of that 4 hours just listening to stories.
That's cool.
He was really nice, very cool. He's left-handed too. Now that I think about it, because when I was leaving, he said, "Hey man, let me show you my guitar," you know, and he pulls out this really nice left-handed Gibson 335, you know. And he said, "You got one of these?" And I said, "No, I never really found the right left-handed one or whatever." He said, "Take that with you." And I was like, "No, I don't want to break it. I don't, you know, whatever." And he was like, "No, man, I'll get it from you later." And I won't do that, you know, just because it's, you know, it's a thing. The lefty code, man. You break my guitar, it's over. You know?
I can never find another one like that.
Pressure.
Right. But, you know, looking back on it, I should have taken the guitar. But
damn it.
It was cool. It was a nice guitar, you know. But he was, you know, want to ride my dirt bike? Like he literally had a dirt bike. So he was like, "You want to ride my dirt bike?" I'm like,
that sounds. It's nice because
he was really nice.
We've talked about this before. It's like, don't meet your heroes, because there's a lot of people you meet and you're like, wish I didn't meet you.
What was that SNL skit when Jewel? Remember that was like somebody was winning tickets off the radio and they get to spend like 2 weeks in the mountains in a cabin with Jewel. And they was, like,
I
the biggest
vaguely
Jewel
remember
fan.
this, but I don't.
Same type of thing though. This guy won, and he ends up in a cabin for 2 weeks, and he was losing his mind. He fucking hated her.
Oh, because she kept playing the "Who Will Say" over and over. That's right.
It's like, leave me alone. You couldn't get out of there. He's in the fucking mountains.
Did they have like security? I don't understand. That's wild.
Well, it was just a skit
SNL
off an
skit.
SNL.
Oh, it was an SNL. I missed that part. I'm sorry.
That's why I remember
I should
it.
listen and talk less.
No,
It was
you're
pretty
fine.
awesome,
Well,
though.
because I'm like, 2 weeks. Of course, anybody would go crazy.
Yeah, like
But
after 2 weeks, like he's just like hating her. He's trying to get out of there, and like they're
Oh, my
snowed in the
God.
mountains.
That's amazing.
And she's playing that song.
Well, it's cool to see that, you know, he was cool about it. I feel like around Nashville, he's still like much of a, you know, a revered kind of person, you know, so it's kind of nice from the musicians I've talked to, at least. So that's kind of nice. And Jada Dreyer, I wasn't too familiar with her, but I looked her up.
Her stuff is great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's a
I did a
songwriter.
handful of gigs with her pretty early on. She was one of when I was saying yes to everything. And I don't think at the time really anyone knew who she was.
Yeah.
You know, she started kind of taking, I mean, she was big enough in Canada that we played some pretty big festivals and stuff up there.
That's cool.
No, I love Jada to death. She's a great writer, great singer. And she's written a lot of stuff for a lot of people at this point, you know.
Yeah, I was looking her up, and I thought that was pretty cool. All those nice Canadians. Well, we're not
Nice
too far
people.
from Canada, so we know a lot of people. Jace Everett, Tonic, and of course Jonathan Dave. All right, Lisa, talk. Edit that part out. Okay.
Dave.
And Jonathan Davis of Korn. So clearly, growing up in the time era that I grew up, obviously loved Korn. So when Dan was telling me, he's like, you know, he's played with Jonathan Davis for like 5 years. I was like, I'm sorry? Are you serious? And he's like, yeah. And then, of course, like I went and I looked and I was like, I'll be damned. So that's really cool to hear that. But I mean, you've played with him for a long time, so you must enjoy it.
I love him.
Yeah.
He's a lot of people get the capital A artist label around here, you know, that's what around Nashville, for anyone that doesn't know. Inside baseball, that's what they call people who have a legit, you know, record contract or whatever, the artist, you know, the principal. He's an artist. You know, he's what I consider an artist anyway. Like he writes his stuff. He's very picky about what he wants. He knows how to tell you what he wants. You know, he plays a little bit of every instrument I've ever seen him come near.
That's cool.
You know, we used to jam with him on drums. You know, in sound check, he would go sit behind Ray's kit, and Brian Allen and I would sit there and play with him, you know, until they started yelling at us to get off so the opening act could set up, because we were those assholes. But no, he's really, really creative and a total sweetheart.
That's
just
cool.
A lovely, lovely guy. He really, I just saw him, I don't know, 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago. And, you know, it was great. You know,
it's one of those things where that's also, like, I say this every time, but that's another reason why I wanted to do this podcast, is because I deal with the general public of tourists that are coming in and out of Nashville all the time, and they're just still don't know about how much music is here other than country.
Right.
And I'm like, every major band that I've loved for the past 30 years, like, someone lives here, someone's moved here. So I'm not surprised to hear that, you know, the drummer of Korn is here, you know, like.
Yeah, Head lives here too.
Yeah, it's just,
Brian.
I've seen him a few times, randomly out places. He came to Acme when I was working one night, and I saw him somewhere else I can't think of.
He's funny. I like him a lot. Yeah, he's real nice.
I didn't really get a chance to talk to him, but he was very cool. He just, like, sat at a table by himself and just, like, chilled out on the rooftop. But yeah, so it's kind of, it's nice to see that, because but that's why it's just like there's a whole other side to Nashville music that I think that if people think about it, but a lot of people don't. They're just coming here and they got Broadway in mind and honky tonks and, you know, like country music, and, you know, that's like everything. And then I'm like, you know, when you say music, it's a lot of music, you know?
Yeah.
So we're not
it's
just
all that stuff that your friend can't hear.
Yeah. Oh my God.
He would love it if he could hear it.
Oh
Yeah,
my
he
God.
would. Doesn't know what he's missing.
Yeah, he would probably show up here and be like, yeah, just like any other place, I guess, except a lot more people walking around singing, you know, like it probably just wouldn't even connect. So, but
Well, that's it. Well, the thing with JD that's cool is that he likes all kinds of music. You know, we were playing in Kansas somewhere, and he came out. He didn't always come out for sound check, you know, but we did because we wanted to play, you know, and we had to. So he comes out, and Ray and Brian Allen, our bass player, who's amazing. He's played on every record you've heard in the last, you know, 8-10 years or whatever. But he's playing upright in this band, you know,
cool.
only upright, at least on this iteration of it. And so the three of us were screwing around, playing some jazz and, you know, whatever. And JD walks up and he's like, yeah, that's cool. It's cool. Play some country. And so I looked at him, you know, key of C, and we 1, 2, 3, 4, boom, or whatever, you know, some old bluegrassy thing. And he was, yeah. And then he's like, play some whatever. You know, he started calling shit out. And it was fun. Later that night in the middle of the show, all right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to bring the show to a stop real quick. We're going to play a little something called Stump the Band. And so he goes, I'm going to call out a style of music, and then they have to do it.
oh my Lord.
So, yeah, so and it stayed for the rest. That was like in May, and we did that for the rest of that year.
Oh,
like
my
all the way through
God.
December. Yeah, the only time we didn't do it was well, like in festivals where you only have, you know, 50 minutes to play whatever, but every time we played our own show, it was, you know, it was in there. So
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Stump the Band. So how did you get to be a part of that gig? Did you like, if my years are mixed up, so did you know Ray ahead of time, or had you played with him?
I'd played with Ray a couple of times. I was the music director for my buddies Dave Parks and Tom Hurst. Had the Nashville Drummers Jam, and I was involved with that as a music director. And so my job was to get the drummers that were going to play on it, you know, and organize what the tunes were going to be. And what that was is we would honor some, top of the mountain drum guru, some time-honored drummer.
Dude, I think that's where
cool.
I met you, man, at the drummers thing, right?
It may have been one of the first ones.
Dude, it was the Jerry one, right?
Yeah, that was one. I think that was the first one, actually, was for Jerry.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah, and then that became the Nashville Drummer. Like that was sort of the birth of it.
Okay.
And then it got to be a bigger deal after that. Like that place was packed, and then we had to move it into a bigger place, and then we had to move it into an even bigger place. So Neil Peart, Alex Van Halen sent us his drum kit. With his drum tech.
Wow.
To set it up for us and everything.
That's
so all the guys that
awesome.
played that night, my kid played it at soundcheck. And he was only like 10 at the time. Yeah, it was a cool thing. So I met Ray actually at the Van Halen one, because that was the first one he did. A buddy of mine, Kevin Murphy, gave me his number and said, "You should get the guy from Korn to play." I'm like, all right. So I texted him and said, "Hey, whatever." So he came out and we did Light Up the Sky, no rehearsal, just
Wow.
1, 2, 3, 4,
Yeah.
And and it was a lot of fun. And then he did another one. We hit it off, talked a little bit here and there. So when the JD thing, like I said, he told Ray he wanted someone that was weird and kind of do a lot of different things. And I have the attention span of a gnat, so I can do a lot of things.
Right. Oh, that's kind of cool, though. That's awesome. So then, so that was back in what no,
He called me in 17.
17.
Yeah,
Okay.
for that gig. Yeah, that it would have been October,
Okay.
November, somewhere in there,
Okay.
I think.
Yeah, so that's been a while, man. Like
Yeah.
even before like COVID and whatnot. I want to get back into this, but I think that we should kind of segue for a minute and then
All right.
jump back into it. So telling you about this podcast, there's a little segment where I teach someone, my guest.
I get to acquire a skill,
Yes,
Yeah.
about how to make a fun drink.
which will work great for me because I don't really drink, so I
Yay.
can make them for everyone
Yes,
else.
exactly.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I'm gonna put the tools right in front of you. I'm gonna show you how to do this.
Okay.
But so I'm very excited. So would you allow me to show you how to make a drink?
Please.
Okay, this will be fun. Now that I'm kind of actually meeting you in person, I'm wondering if you're gonna like this drink, but I think it'll be fine. I think it'll be good.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
Hit me.
Well, let's just take a quick minute. We'll get set up.
Okay.
All right, so
All
we're
right.
back. Got everything in front of us right now. So this will be kind of fun. I'm going to teach you how to make a classic cocktail, which pretty much every drink that's ever been made really comes from the same 20 cocktails.
Oh, I didn't
Everything
know
else is pretty much a variation of that. But as more things are developed over time, they find ways to make it really cool. So this is a daiquiri. I know
Okay.
you mentioned that you don't drink a lot, but when you do, rum might be a cool thing for you. So this is going to be nice and light, and I made some strawberry syrup, which is super easy, and I'm going to give this to you to take home.
that. Oh, wow.
So
okay,
you can
cool.
use it in anything, like you can use it in any sodas or soda water, or something to drink with water would be fine too. So you don't have to just use it in this. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. We're going to take the big tin, this tin first, you take yours.
Okay.
And I just wash my hands, they're clean. For all the germaphobes, I say this all the time. I'm gonna put a few rocks into the shaker, and then you can do the same.
How many? Enough?
Enough so it's like half full, or
Okay.
almost half full.
All right. Put that one on the floor.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's where that goes.
Do you know how many times, like, I feel like when we're making drinks behind the bar, like someone will drop like a plastic glass or something, you'll step on it, it'll be like, or like ice cubes, like constantly, like all the time. It's like a thing. All right.
That's what we got.
Okay. So I'm going to show you how to use this. So we take the big side.
Okay.
We take the rum. And because I'm making one for Dan too, I'm going to pour
Don't
two.
forget about Dan.
Don't forget about Dan. The last time he was like, you forgot about me. I was like, oh shit, I'm sorry. So you're going to pour this one time up until this first line
Okay.
in this big one. And that's 1.5 ounces.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
All right. This is going to be strong.
It'll be fine.
Okay.
You're going to put it in here. Put it in the
going to
big
be
tin.
fine.
I'll drink it.
Okay. And the next thing we're going to do is flip it over
Okay.
into the smaller side. And then you are going to pour
Put that in front of the camera more, babe, so we can
This?
see it home.
right here. How's this look?
There you go. Perfect. Yeah, down by there.
You're
All
going
right.
to pour this fresh squeezed lime juice halfway to that like first mark.
Okay.
And then you're going to pour it in the tin.
All right.
Okay, now we're gonna do 3/4 of an ounce of this lovely red syrup, which is like the next line up, like right below. Okay. See, it's good to have big hands because like you just grab it and just put it in
helps
there.
with guitar.
Right?
And palming basketballs, because that's a thing you need in life.
Well, I mean, Michael Jordan definitely
He's
did
got
something
some big
with it.
hands.
Right.
He got some big hands. Okay, so what we're gonna do, I suppose we could put a little bit more lime juice in if we wanted to, but I'm kind of the type of person where like I look at a recipe and I look at a bunch of different recipes and I'm like,
Somewhere in there is the answer.
in there is gonna be
Right.
what I'm happy with.
Yeah.
So we take this small tin,
Okay.
put it where the big tin is. All right,
I've never done this before.
it's gonna be fun. Move this out of the way in case things
I've
get
always
wild.
wanted to
Well, now
shake a drink.
Now you can do this. Okay, so it's kind of on there, right?
Right?
Okay, now we're gonna shake it for like 10 seconds.
Okay.
That's awesome. You guys are great.
Probably about 10, right? Stop counting. Okay, I think we're good. All right.
My hands are cold, so
And it's nice and
Frosty.
frothy.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay, so these you'll probably be okay, but to avoid a weird sound it'll make, just hit the side of the tin. You'll get it to move. There you go.
okay.
Okay. Now you don't have to serve, like you can put this, daiquiris are supposed to be served up, but if you want ice, you can just pour it over ice. And it's summertime, so I feel like people always want their drinks a little cold. So do you want to put yours up or do you want it on the rocks?
I like up is no rocks.
Up is no
ice?
rocks.
Okay, up.
Okay, so take this,
Okay.
put it on top of the tin.
Also, I really just want this.
It's pretty badass.
Yeah, it is.
You're going to put it on top of that big tin.
Okay,
And
which
then-
way?
Where the coils go down.
Down.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, okay.
And you're going to pour it.
Oh, I see.
Yep, you're going to pour it into that non-coupe glass that's a wine glass. Yep.
This. Gotcha.
And for me, I'm just going to cheat because I want ice. So me and Dan are going to drink ones with the ice. Lovely. Wonderful. Yes, you did it perfectly.
Great. Thanks.
And then you can take this. I should have made like little lime strips, but I didn't. So you can just put one on the side.
Nope.
Okay. See, I don't know. Like the summertime, I'm like everything on ice. Everything. That's just me. Here, babe, this is for you. Okay.
Oh, this is great.
Yes. Chris, thank you so much for coming out. This has been fun. We still got a few more things, so you're not going anywhere yet. But
Okay.
all right, cheers.
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 Cheers. Let's take a sip.
Oh, that is delicious.
It's good.
I am amazing at this.
Kind of insist
If this
upon
guitar
itself.
thing doesn't work out.
Yes, you know what you're going to do next.
Yeah,
Kind of insist upon itself.
it does. I
No.
agree with it.
I am a fan. I like the strawberry.
Good job, babe.
Wow, that
Yeah.
is really tasty.
You
Yeah.
good, babe.
Well, good job in making it yourself. How did it feel shaking the tin? That's the fun
I
part.
love it.
Right?
Yep.
Like that's like the most fun part about it. You're like, you know what? I'm just gonna do that. There's when it gets really wild and you're like 3 deep at the bar, I start like double shaking it. People are like, oh my God. You're like, just give me your money and shut up. You know, like just relax. They're
like Tom Cruise.
yeah, exactly. Oh my God. All right. So if I sit back here, am I gonna bother the
No, I think you're actually good right there.
Okay, I'm
Sit
good
nice
right
and
here.
tall.
All right, Chris,
There
are
you
you
go.
comfortable?
I am very comfortable.
Okay, so you don't have to drink that because I know you're not much of a drinker. Basically, that is yours. You can do whatever you want with it.
Thanks.
Yeah, there's some water there, so don't feel stressed. Don't feel like you have to, do anything.
Thanks.
All right,
I have
awesome.
relaxed.
I like this. Okay, so I want to ask you one more question about working with Jonathan Davis.
Okay.
So have you written with him, or have you been
Sort
as
of.
well,
Not well.
or collaborating on anything?
Kind of. We messed around with stuff at Soundcheck on tour, and then after the tour, Ray and Brian and I spent about a month at my studio and put together about 40 pieces of music.
Damn.
And, yeah.
Wow.
And that was to send to him. He was going to do lyrics and mess around with the arrangements, and then also write music for it. And Korn had their tour, like, because we'd been gone for a year, then Korn had to go back out and all this stuff, and then the pandemic happened. So that's where we were. I've recorded with him. We did a sort of a Western blues version of his single, What It Is, with Nick Raskulinecz here in town. We did it live, and I got to play slide guitar on it, which was cool. And we got a buddy of ours, friend of mine actually, I recommended him for it. Brilliant keyboardist named Tyra Sass came in and played B3.
I know Tyrus.
He's great.
Yeah.
So the funny thing is, he was out with Johnny Lang at a theater across from the theater we were playing in, like Spokane, Washington, or something.
Oh my God! That's
I got a text from him, like, during the day. I just finished sound check, and I get a text that was, hey, I think you're next door to us, and so we ended up hanging out all day.
That is so funny. Yeah, he's a cool dude.
He is.
Yeah.
But he played great on it. It was really cool.
That's awesome. So it's cool that you get a chance to, like, kind of. It's still nice that even though you're playing with people, you get to do your own thing too. Yeah.
Well, I wrote with Ray Luzier, who's in that group, but he's the drummer for Korn. Today,
that's awesome.
We finished and I came over here.
That's so cool.
Yeah, we do a lot of fun things.
So, yeah, and you had a solo album that came out in 2020?
2020.
Okay. And I think if I'm reading this correctly, I just love the name of it, Generation of Vipers.
Yeah, Generation of Vipers. I've always loved the various idioms for a multiple of a group of things, like or a multiple of a particular group. So, Murder of Crows, that sort of thing. And Generation of Vipers seemed interesting because the other thing was that almost every tune has different players on it, and all of them are just aces. You know, there's a tune with Chris Fraser playing drums and Trip Walmsley, who plays with Tom and me in the Power Triplets, is just an unbelievable bass player. Plays literally like no one else on earth. And so the two of them are on that. And then I have another one where, listen to this line. So I have one tune called Vista do Balcone, which is a view from the balcony, Nero watching Rome burn kind of thing. And is
this all very indicative of everything going on in 2020?
It wasn't really a reflection of that as much as just it's kind of an ominous tune, but it's definitely that sort of the overlords looking down at everything and just kind of not being affected by it, which I think is prevalent even today. So, but that one's great. It has Brian Allen's playing upright bass on it, who plays with me in JD's band. The drummer on it is Jerry Rowe, who's a session guy here, who's incredible. And then the percussion on it is Tom Hurst and Nick Buda, who's also another amazing drummer. Plays with Chesney, and he's like played on everyone's record, So it's kind of funny because it's like, most people it would cost you $1 million to have that rhythm section, But yeah, it's pretty cool. And so there are a ton of stuff. I've got some other things in the works for another solo record with. With again, Chris Fraser's playing on it, and Billy Sheehan. So that's a little different from that. So it's not going to be. That was a Generation of Vipers, part 1 or whatever. Volume 1, I think, actually.
Ooh, I like the whole volume.
Yeah,
part.
And so I was going to do Volume 2 next, but I think Volume 2 is going to have to be after this one that's about to happen. So.
Oh, sure. Well, and you have the Power Triplet.
The Power Triplets.
Yeah,
that's
with
right.
Tom Hurst.
With Tom Hurst and Trip Walmsley on bass. Yeah.
And Tom was just here 3 weeks ago?
Possibly 3 weeks ago, yeah.
Yeah, 3 weeks ago.
Tom's the best, man.
He was our 3rd episode. So this is the 5th. So yeah, he was here 3.
Did you get to ask any questions or just say, okay, go?
I know, right? No.
You should read his text.
Really?
It's like War and Peace. Oh, okay. And then this and this and this. It's so funny.
He was great because he poked fun at himself a couple of times, and he was just like, I know, I love to talk. But I was like, but you're awesome. Like, you say what you want to say, and we'll just go from there. But I gave him
he's the
questions
best,
to
man.
look over. And he was like, oh, I love the questions. And then he's like, oh, I know, I'm jumping ahead. I'm like, no, don't worry about it. We will talk about it.
But I digress. I can go back to the Southern Stick if you want to go.
But he's so great. But he didn't mention the Power Triplets, I don't think.
You know what? We didn't get there.
Maybe we didn't.
Because we talked about it, because he's got like that extensive career of list of people he, we just kind of, I think we ran out of time.
Yeah.
We were,
We ran out of time. He had a gig coming up.
His resume, it's always been insane. And then he moved here and it became even nuttier,
Well, it's like, I always wonder how like people have so much energy. And then people say that to me and I'm like, I don't feel like I have a lot of energy. And they're like, but you do so much. And I'm like, I don't know, maybe I'm just tired. I don't feel like I do it. But yeah, it's the same thing. It's like there are some people that are just around the clock moving, and Tom is just one of those people where I feel like he's got a lot going on.
I'll tell you the truth. I work 18 hours a day doing what I do. And I
Do
thought
you
I was a
really?
workaholic. And then I met Tom.
Yeah.
That guy works. He has, at any given point, he'll have 8 jobs.
Yeah, that's crazy. Of
and
stuff
they're all awesome.
Things that are like he's trying to get his attention on,
Right.
so lots of things that he feels deserves his attention. But going back to you, like I know I messaged you a couple of times because I work really weird hours right now. So it's like I'm up for a little bit and I'm like, cool, I'll send Chris a text later. And then like 8:30 in the morning, I'm like texting you and I'm like, oh my God, it's 8:30 in the morning.
I'd been up for 4 hours.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
Well, and then Dan's the same way. Dan's always burning the candle at both ends all the time between music and everything else.
It's rock and roll, babe.
Yeah. Without drugs. Without the drugs, though.
Yeah.
Too old
Music
for that.
is the drug, babe.
Exactly.
That's right.
I'm just saying. I'm just putting that in there. But, like sex, drugs, rock and roll. Nowadays, it's just rock and roll.
That's true, babe.
Well, the sexy part, too.
Yeah, you're sexy, babe.
Oh, thanks.
All right, let's not get too weird. We're on camera
Maybe
here,
we'll
babe.
cut that
All right?
out. I don't know. No, keep it in. Okay,
right.
so...
I can hold the camera.
She said, "Keep it in." That's what she said. Oh, come on now. Come on, Dan.
No.
Come on, Dan.
You're insisting upon yourself, Dan.
We just stole Chris's thunder completely and put it on us.
God, I'm sorry, Chris.
No, okay, so Tom, God damn it, Lisa, we're gonna cut
We're
that part
talking about
out.
Tom
The triplet.
and the triplets. Yes.
Yes.
All right.
Well, it's not the triplets.
The Power Triplets.
The Power Triplets.
Yeah.
I was like, let's get it right. So how long have you all been playing together?
Since I believe 2006. I think that's right, 6 or 7.
So before you moved here.
Yeah,
Yeah, 'cause
actually,
you
that's
obviously-
true. Yeah, I was. I lived in Florida at the time. Tom and I played a lot of different things together down there, and had a bunch of music, and we wanted to do something original together. But what really sort of pushed it forward was I was invited to do this Guitar Hero jam, not the game, like. Jam with a couple of guitar heroes in Austin at one of the NAMM shows there. And I went, and they needed a drummer, so I recommended Tom.
Okay.
And
Always a good recommendation.
right, and they had a bass player, so we go to this play. We played at the Troubadour in Austin.
Nice.
And the other 2 guys that were playing guitar were very loud. They're friends of mine, so I'm not going to mention any names. They were very loud. And they were playing on each other and all that. And whatever. I'll hang back until I'm looked at to solo or whatever, and I'll play with them. It's fine. But because they were loud, I stepped back towards Tom, and we started playing. The bass player was already showing signs of being pretty great. And he comes over to us, and so the 3 of us started playing Where's the One? Because those guys were so loud, they couldn't hear what we were doing anyway.
Okay.
So we were like, well, let's just play together and do weird stuff. And so we just started going. And the bass player was Trip Walmsley. And at some point, they let him have a moment, and he just leveled the
that's
place
cool.
with, his amazing, beautiful musicality. And so when it was over, Tom and I talked about it, and we're like, well, let's go talk to this guy, So he was demoing at another booth across from where I was demoing, different amp company, So on one of my breaks, we went over and talked to him for a little bit, and he was game. So we started sending tracks. I sent him some stuff to play on, and his version of the story is that he tried to play the worst possible things he could play on it, to see if he could get fired. and I loved it. So he was like, and that's when I knew, And then we played a gig together, and that sealed it. We recorded a bunch of stuff, and started playing a lot. And so we did a record then called Tada. We did that in my garage on like the very first home version of Pro Tools, the 001 little interface that was like, I don't know, $400 or something. And then the next record after that was several years later, Music for the Adventurous, which we did when, I think we did most of it after I'd moved up here.
Okay.
And then the last one, High, was also done here. So it was, it's always fun playing with those guys. We've done a bunch of gigs together.
That's cool.
It's become more rare. Trip lives in Lake Charles, Louisiana. So it's, and Tom and I work constantly. So Trip and I are trying to get together on some ideas right now. And it's, for me, it's impossible for the next, 3 weeks. I won't be able to even listen to some of the stuff he's, it's one of those.
Yeah.
So, we took a break, and now we want to, maybe try and get together and play some more. So,
that's cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So with your solo record coming out, and then the Power Triplets, like kind of getting back together and doing some more work, that kind of leads me, like, and I think I know what you're going to say, but I want to ask regardless, between making your own music and working with people to create your own music, and then playing out with other people's music. Do you have a preference, or is it kind of really what's in the moment?
Yeah, no, I don't. I love all of it.
That's cool.
Yeah, I love all of it. Whatever that day, the fact that each day brings some version of what you just described is amazing to me. That's what I've always wanted.
That's cool.
I mean, that was the dream when you're 12.
Right.
I remember my uncle took me to see The Song Remains the Same when I was a kid, and I was like, I want to be Jimmy Page, and,
Right.
Or at least do what Jimmy Page does,
Right.
which is sit around and write stuff and go out and play shows. So that's,
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And is there something that you've played with all these artists and had the opportunity to write with people? Do you take away something with each person that you play with? Like, is it always kind of a learning experience for you?
It's different with different people. I don't know if it's so much, in a way, like when I was talking earlier about finding a way of finding myself in the thing that they do, and being able to paint within their frame, that's always a fun challenge, because you have to kind of get inside what their milieu is, get inside what their vibe is, and you hear be true to the vibe or be true to whatever, but that is a thing, like to be like true to what their thing is, so I'm sure with every single person I've ever played with, I took something from it, because even if it's just a jam where you're jamming with someone, you are making micro adjustments. That's in true. Time and in feel and inflection and intonation and stuff to make sure everything sounds good. You're kind of micro mixing on the spot. So I don't see how you couldn't come away with without collecting. Even if it's just a 0.001% moving the needle forward, it's still forward. Yeah.
Totally.
And it's always important to keep moving forward.
Is there an artist that you appreciate more now that you didn't when you were younger?
Steely Dan.
Steely Dan, okay.
Which is weird, because I knew why I should appreciate Steely Dan when I knew of Steely Dan when I was young.
Okay.
And I never disliked them, but I had friends who had gone to music school, and older people that had older than me had gone to music school, and they they all have a Steely Dan cover band or whatever. Every town has a group of guys that went to Berkeley or wherever, and they came home and started a Steely Dan cover band. And so it was, there was something about that I shied away from. It was the tonality of it, the aural texture of it. I never grooved with until later. And now what's funny is their engineer, Roger Nichols, has always been one of my recording heroes, just from a engineering standpoint. He's brilliant. But now I really love that I know what it is. In the 70s, a lot of things that were hits back then had a similar softness to it that as a kid I didn't like because I wanted everything to be, Led Zeppelin or Harder Edged or even the jazz I listen to. You listen to Coltrane. That's not soft. It's aggressive.
You wanted more bite.
Yeah, more bite. The tone of it had more bite to it. It wasn't just cushiony and pillowy weed music. And that I thought of Steely Dan as kind of weed music. But now. I don't know what changed. I'm not going to try and guess, but I like it more. I still am not a habitual listener, but if it pops up on something in the car or whatever, then I'm into it.
That's cool.
I actually went to see some friends do a Steely Dan cover band here a few months ago, and they were fucking awesome.
Oh, that's cool.
It was fantastic, and all of the players in that group were top ace guys, and they were phenomenal, so yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
So yeah, the answer to that question is Steely Dan. I knew what they were supposed to be, but it didn't appeal to me when I was a kid, but now I like it. Yeah.
No, that's awesome. I think that's an important question to ask everybody. I feel like it kind of rings true. It just kind of shows, like, I don't know, a certain growth. I have tons of bands the same way. What about you, Dan?
What's that, babe?
Is there a band that you appreciate more now that you didn't before? I don't think I know this.
God, I mean, if I had like 5 minutes to think about it, there's a lot of bands that I really love now, songwriting wise, singing wise. Like, I think Tom Waits was a guy that I discovered late.
I love Tom Waits.
He's like one of my favorites, man. And
sure.
like the biggest fan that I know is now Matt Farley. I turned him on to Tom Waits, and now the guy's like
loves Tom Waits.
I saw Tom Waits at the Beacon, man. But Tom Waits is one of those guys, being a singer of what I am. It contradicts everything that I grew up listening to, of him being like this crooked singer with crooked music, but it's fucking perfect. That guy's a fucking artist. That guy's
What's great
amazing.
about it is the character. It's funny because I like
His
singers
vision.
that have characters. I don't like, it's not that I don't like it. It doesn't appeal to me as much when someone's like this, songstress or a song, someone who's a male vocalist who's this perfect whatever. I like things to have. Bowie is one of my favorite singers of all time, but he's not what you would consider like a classic, a classically great singer.
Right.
But he had so much style and
charisma,
soul and charisma. Every note he sang had a
like a purpose, right? Like yeah, man. That's what I
It's
feel
stuck
about.
somewhere, like with you.
Yeah.
No, I get that. Well, so what is your greatest accomplishment that you feel is your greatest accomplishment to date?
My son.
Oh, that's so cool.
That's easy. Yeah, that's not even close.
Perfect
he's
answer.
and I don't know how much I had to do with it. I mean, he's a lot like me, but I didn't,
How old's
you
your
don't
son?
control that,
Does that bother you?
Yeah, we can go in a second.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, he's 20, he's in college.
Okay.
He's amazing.
Does he live here?
He's going to school in Alabama, so
Awesome.
he's studying biomedical engineering because he's a pretty smart kid. But he's one of the sweetest people you'll ever meet, and honestly so, and super considerate. I don't know where that came from, but he's just such a good dude.
No, that's really cool.
Yeah.
That's cool that you say it like hands down the first thing.
Yeah, it's not even close.
That's awesome. So he doesn't play guitar.
He plays drums.
Okay.
We have friends who are professional drummers that don't have his feel.
Wow.
He doesn't play much anymore because he's in school.
Right.
But all through high school he played. And, I remember he'd been playing on a drum kit for 6 months. He'd been playing in school band for like a year or two at that point. And he got his first kit, and we're set up in my little studio, and we're playing Back in Black by AC/DC, which is my personal litmus test for the feel of a drummer. If you can play that song exactly like the notes are written out, but make it feel like that song is supposed to feel, you're a raging badass as far as I'm concerned. And man, he was fucking, 13 years old, and I would
That's
try to
awesome.
push
Yeah.
the tempo while playing, like try and play, and he was just like, nope, it's right here, Dad.
Laying back.
And it wasn't that I couldn't, it was that I was trying to see what he would do, and he
Right.
didn't chase me. He was just like, nope, here it is.
That's
right
awesome.
there. It was great.
That's a really cool thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for coming in
Thanks
the
for
studio.
having me. Seriously, it was a delight.
This has
Thank
been
you.
awesome. I'm so glad that I had a chance to sit down and talk with you for a minute. And I think it's going to be a really great episode. I think we had some good things.
Cool.
I can't wait to see what you have next. So when your album comes out, we're going to be waiting for it.
Great.
All right.
Oh, yeah.
I'll send you some stuff now. Early.
Cool.
You can check it out.
Right on.
Be sure and put that pretty filter, all over this.
On everything.
Yeah. We got one of those. I use it on me all the
Good.
time, dude.
Good,
all the
good.
time on me.
Good, good.
All right. Okay. Well, we'll see you next time.
All right. Bye. Thanks.
Bye.
Rock and roll.
Cheers. Hey guys, you've just watched another episode of Nashville on the Rocks. And if you've liked what you've seen, please hit the subscribe button. Thanks. We'll see you next time.